conductivity. This does apply to many appliances. I've done many tests, and this little demonstration here is a continuation of yesterday, just to show on the watt meter what my draw is from the wall as I'm running this. The next demonstration will be a bigger coil and a larger load. I hope you all have a great day.
All right. Thank you for uploading that today, Mike. That was, or Gerald, I should say. That was awesome. And another Mike, thank you for joining us. It's the first time I think we've had you on.
Yes, sir.
Mike.
Hello, Mike.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Been watching
Good,
both
brother.
your channels, by the way, Mike.
Mike does, right?
The other Mike, he left already.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and Gerald.
Everyday Research
Gerald.
Mike,
Yep.
but we got Gerald with us.
I've been
And
watching your channel too, Gerald. Nice work, by the way.
Awesome. Thank you.
right, and Mike, I've been fascinated by all of your inputs, and you've done a fair amount of your own videos and stuff you're working on too, right? On your
Well,
channel a little bit.
I was watching Mike's videos on the atom motor and what he's been doing with that, and I guess that's what he was talking about just now, right? The same motor.
Yeah, he was talking about the miniature version of it.
Right, and he was getting experience of it running without the source connected. So he might be capturing the flyback from the inductor somehow.
That's a possibility, definitely. But because it's spun up, I don't know if he's catching the flyback. Maybe that he's catching the flyback
On the off cycle, he must
yeah,
be.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting.
His capacitor must be. He must have a diode reversed into the capacitor.
He's got an interesting circuit. You would have to go over it with him, or go back to his original videos and he explains it. That piezoelectric that he's got in the loop is pretty neat.
That might have something to do with it too.
It's fascinating. The more you add into the circuits, and like the more dynamic they get, and you can get these different amplifying effects, like on exponential levels, when you just tweak certain resonances and certain frequencies of specific pieces that you add into them. And
it's all about balance.
Right?
Like I catch the flyback, and I also use the skin effect to multiply what's coming out, and I also use kind of like it almost acts like a buck booster. So I'm upping my voltage as well, right? So what I've tried to do is take every little anomaly or whatever you want to call it that most electrical engineers try and get rid of, and I'm trying to use them to multiply what it is that I'm doing.
Yeah, they try to get rid of it. So they call it surge suppressors.
Yeah, but I want that surge, and I want to be able to use it in order to make the system more efficient.
Have you, Gerald, have you replicated the Bedini pulse motor?
Oh, yeah. Bendini, actually, I've been watching him. I even got to talk to him a couple times. So, yeah, he's kind of one of the first guys that got me all into this. Him and Russ Grease.
You know what's funny about that schematic is, I'm an electrical engineer. I graduated IDT. I have, education in this stuff, but I've never understood what he was talking about regarding the reverse flyback voltage. In the whole process of me replicating it and getting it running, I still did not understand that, right? And then after I got it running and some months of building a few of them, I still didn't understand it. What is the reverse flyback voltage? And so basically, when you charge up an inductor and you remove the charge, and it loses its charge completely to zero. At the 0 point where the inductor completely loses its charge, it gets a surge coming into it from the environment, and that can and that in turn flips the polarity of the inductor. So if you had two wires on the two ends of this inductor, You charge it, on the left end with a plus and the right end with a minus. By the time it loses its charge and the flyback comes in, the left hand becomes the minus and the right hand becomes the positive. It flips the poles on the two ends of the wire. So if you have a diode on the on the reverse positive end of the inductor, when it does split, you can dump that energy into wherever you want. And I think that's what's going on. If you have a capacitor hooked up somewhere, capacitors are very capable of capturing reverse flyback voltage.
It's actually funny you say that, because that's part of how my bifilar coil systems work. I have on my secondary, I have a diode and a 1 nanofarad 3 kilovolt capacitor. So when I'm pulsing, it's filling the inductor, filling the capacitor, and when I'm not pulsing, that capacitor is running that back EMF back through the inductor, creating or reinforcing the magnetic field, right? So I'm getting it twice on one pulse.
Which is this again? Which setup is this again?
The setup that you've seen in the video, actually, most of my.
Well, you've got a lot of things. You got a lot of things going on, different things. So I'm not sure which one.
That's true. That's true. But on the coil itself, on the secondary, I'm using just a capacitor and a diode. But it's like reverse, right?
To capture the flyback.
To capture the flyback, to actually send it back into the coil itself.
Oh, the same coil that you're right. Okay.
Yeah, because my bifilar capacitors are not like other people's coils are not like other people's bifilar coils. They're separated differently. They act more like capacitor plates than they do an inductor. I use 7 different instabilities in order to make the whole system stable. And if you don't add one of those components, it doesn't work the way you see it work now.
So Gerald, what we got here on the screen here, this is a circuit here that's based off.
Should I replay it?
Is this yours, Mike?
Volume, Mike, or do you want to just describe it, or should I just? Is
this your circuit?
I'll describe it right now. Yeah, I in the process of replicating the Bedini pulse motor, when I got done with it, something hit me. I understood something, but I didn't quite understand it. I just caught on to something, without still at that point not knowing what the reverse flyback voltage is. I caught on to it somehow.
Yep.
Visually through the circuit. I still didn't understand what it was, or that the inductor would reverse its polarity until later. So until after I created this circuit is when I actually understand that the inductor reverses polarity when the field collapses, which sounds ridiculous, but that's the case. That's the case. So
I didn't mean to cut you off there. The minute I seen this circuit, I literally drew it out because I know that this works.
Yeah, right. You could see it. If you understand how to capture the flyback with that HV diode, that high voltage diode there, you understand everything, then you get it, and it makes perfect sense. But most people will not get this because they don't understand. They don't understand that the coil flips its polarity, and they wouldn't understand why that diode is facing the other way, which was the case for me for the longest time. And even until after I came up with this diagram, it was after the diagram was finally drawn out that I understand that the inductor reverses its polarity, which once again sounds ridiculous, but that was the case for me.
So
but it turned out to be work. I'm familiar with switches. I'm an electrician by trade, 30 plus years. I've worked with double pole, double throw relays. I understand all this complicated switching stuff in other avenues. So somehow this was able to come out,
Are you an engineer or just an electrician?
Yeah, I've engineered houses in my head and wired them up,
And you're building and engineering these. I'd argue that both of you are very qualified electrical engineers.
It's all about switches, really.
Autodidactic and self-taught.
Well, I was gonna say your education actually, when it comes to capturing the flyback and getting into this sort of realm of engineering, it stops you from looking at this because you're told, you're
Exactly.
taught that that's
Exactly. I
impossible.
realized that too. I
Yeah.
realized that. I self-realized that I wasn't able to see it for that very reason that you
Well, I
just
applaud
mentioned.
you because having an education and still figuring it out,
You would
that's
never
a tough
stop
one.
and say, "Hey, the
And
coil
that's
is
why
going to
we
reverse
actually need
polarity."
you, Mike,
Yeah,
so
that's
much.
awesome.
You're the
Awesome work,
bridge
Mike.
into so many electricians that I know that will be able to be like, here it is.
And maybe I'm incorrect about those batteries acting like a diode, as I drew that diode in there just to show that batteries essentially can be a diode.
No, that's correct. I
I mean,
when I
is it correct? Yeah.
my first
Sure
Bendini
thing.
motor, I charged a battery and I had pulse charged it for, well, I don't know, I did experiments with it for about a month, charging it, and then I took it out of the loop and I just started using it. And that thing was so hard to kill, it blew
Yeah,
my
right.
mind.
Exactly. I would concur with you on that. I had the same experience. Did exactly what you did with the Bedini. You let it charge up, to you got the run battery and the charge battery. So
Yep.
I'd be draining the run battery, from 12.5 volts and pulling up a charging battery from 11 volts back up to 12.5. And you see the run battery drops down to the same voltage that the charge battery started with. And at that point, you're like, and the whole time the wheel's spinning, and you start to figure it out.
It's amazing. I love how Bendini did all that. It blows my
He really
mind.
opened the door.
Yep.
He really opened the door for at least me, and I'm sure a lot of others on this reverse flyback concept of an inductor, which is key to understanding when you're having anomalies. If you want to, you call it an anomaly, but it's not.
No,
It's
it's a
it's
voltage
not
spike.
magic. It's
No,
only
it's not.
magic because you don't understand the reverse flyback voltage. If you did, you'd be able to build motors that spin, at their own force perpetually. As long as you don't create too much drag on that, it'll keep spinning, and you put a coil next to that. As long as it's spaced correctly, you won't stop the wheel. It'll keep going, and your coil will keep picking up. You
So I
know
have
the
sorry.
Go
I have
ahead.
an idea for this where as it's spinning and it's almost spinning itself perpetually, you know how when you pull energy out it loses its torque and sometimes drops its spin.
Yeah, you got
If
too much lens. You got to back off with your stator and gap it some more. Don't pull
See,
too
you
much.
get it. You get it. I don't even have to say no more.
In fact, anyone who can create an iron partnered with a magnet rotor and get it to just spin off the pull force of the magnet to the iron, and as long as you don't drag more than what the pull force is on your spin, then you can easily space your coil far enough so it doesn't drag it, break the system more than it can offer. And what the pull force of that magnet to the iron is let's say it's 10 pounds. If you put a coil that has 11 pounds of braking force, well, then you're going to stop the motion. So you
Yep.
put a coil that has 9 pounds of braking force. That's the concept.
It's all about
And, and,
balance.
you and your wheel
There's
will
it
slow
was
down, but it won't
you guys
stop.
are talking about, and it's so key. And there's actually a couple of tricks or like suppressed sciences of like how you wire the two like positive negative coming out of the coil and through the
Bernie, you can see it
oh,
better if you go forward in the video. I erased one half of the circuit so you could see how it go to the middle. Right there. Forward, right there. And you see how I digitally erased half the circuit so one can see how it's a basic Bedini circuit times two in one. And yeah, I've gone over this multiple times to look for possible shorts and you know, I'm not able to find it. As long as the switching is done the way it's shown, switch A being closed while switch B is open, and vice versa, you won't have any shorts unless both switches are closed at the same time. Then you'll have a short.
So you can do this with solid state relays, essentially.
Yeah, this could be solid state, and you know, the inductor. Okay, if you look at where the HV diode is pointing towards the positive of the battery A.
Yep.
Okay, now go to battery B. See, battery B is the one charging up this coil, giving it plus and minus. And you look at the plus on battery B, see where it's touching the coil?
Yep.
Okay, that's going to be the positive terminal of that coil. And when the coil is, when that switch A is now open and that coil loses its charge, where you see battery B touching the coil will not be a plus anymore. It will be a negative. And at once it loses its charge. And the other side will be a positive. And you see how the HV diode is now facing that way to positive on A?
That's a nice way of capturing it, eh? Yeah.
Yeah. Now people are flipping their batteries back and forth. This is automating it every. I guess
yeah, you don't have to flip the battery. You flip the switch.
With this circuit, you can just flip the. You need two inductors, though. You need two drive coils, not one, to get this to work.
Interesting.
You need two drive coils. You can't
just. Hence the first diagram, right?
Well, this is the same diagram. Just
but you took one of the inductors out. Yeah.
Yeah, let it go through. You'll see it. You'll see. Let it play. It'll bring back to the rest of the schematic. And it'll show you the other coil will pop up. And yeah, man, this was stuck in my head for 2 years. Literally, I was losing my head. I had to get this figured out. There was an idea stuck in my head. I didn't know what it was, and it was based off the Bedini replication process. Brought this idea to me somehow, and 2 years later, I was like, this has to come out of my head. I have to figure out what is this, you know. What is this idea? And I had to sit down for 3 hours about, you know.
I wonder if
blank paper.
Where your inductors are, because like you said, you have to have two coils for this. My system works a little bit differently. It creates spin without moving parts. I wonder if I used one of my inductors one way and the other, like my secondary the other way.
Yeah. That's just you know, that counterclockwise, clockwise thing, I just put that in there and just for Pete's sake.
No, yeah, I get that. You know what? I'm going to try this circuit on my system, and if it works, that's awesome. I'll do what I can to send you a coil for yourself for that.
I mean, technically speaking, if battery A is pulsing coil 1 for 180 degrees of one cycle, and then battery B is pulsing coil 2 for that other 180 degrees in the other direction, and you have a third coil picking up in the middle, or, you know, if those two coils are wrapped around an inductor, and then you have a third one, theoretically, you should be getting an alternating current, you know, from that.
Oh, I never thought of it that way.
I mean, that's what I'm thinking. North, south.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
You know, when you build a three-phase motor, generator, you have a coil, you have a round coil, and the magnets north and south have to land over the arms of the coil. So you got north and south over one coil, creating AC on a three-phase alternating generator. So in theory, this is the same thing, north-south, but DC pulses creating them instead of magnets passing over a coil. I'm sure this is one way of converting DC to AC. I know that the DC inverters, they just pulse DC from the 0 line with timing, you know, up to the 10-volt line to simulate an AC signal, you know, and then down back to the 0 line and below the 0 line to the negative 10 volts. And they just pulse that pattern, you know, in a sine wave. They pulse it. The voltage values from 0 to 10 positive, down to 0, down to 10 negative, back up to 0, back up to 10 positive. That's a DC inverter simulating an AC sine wave. Well, this is another way of doing it.